Greetings, YouTube. Let's talk about oozes, specifically the Slithering tracker. Now, this is a creature that I've used before, but just as a monster. Classic, you throw it at the party as an obstacle in their path or as something that is incidentally blocking their access to something. You know what I mean? So these are a long, moist streak along the dark stone suddenly undulates like a serpent and then rises up to strike. So these are CR4, so they're not a great challenge. They are neutral, small ooze. So neutral, remember that. There's a theme in my videos on this series. They have blind sense and they have pretty decent perception. A blind sense 16-foot radius, that's awesome. That means they can sense everything in their environment. That's very cool, very useful. They have a very average AC, nothing to write home about. They have a good fort save, their good reflex save, and their will is abysmal. So I guess you use spells against these folks because they roll spells, but though they are mind affecting, has difficulty because they are oozes. But yeah, will saves, not their forte. They have a 10 speed and a 10 climb. What's interesting is they don't have a swim speed. And to me, that seems strange. They're oozes that look like liquid because they're transparent. So wouldn't it make sense for them to take advantage of the fact that they could then be absolutely invisible in water? Why wouldn't they do that? Even if these things were actually mindless, say they were just a mindless ooze, evolution would just reward them for hiding in water because they would get more food. So evolution would just kind of, I don't see why they don't have a swim speed. I really don't. I would give them one with them difficulty. They have 2 slam attacks, plus a grab and a paralysis. They have a blood drain ability, which is, and a grab ability. So very versatile, quite dangerous. And the blood drain is 1d2, so Constitution. So that's dangerous. Now here's the thing: small ooze. So small, like 3 feet in diameter. Okay, 16 strength. That's unreal for a small creature. Okay, dex of 18. They're very agile. Con of 23. These things are resistant. All right, these are tough creatures. Intelligence of 11, wisdom of 10, and charisma of 1. They're not sparkling conversationalists. But remember, intelligence 11, that makes them just as intelligent as your average commoner. Okay? Their attacks are their slams and grapples, and then, of course, they're paralyzing things, and then they begin to do a blood drain on them after they have done that. They have a climb skill of plus 11, but again, I still find that strange that if you have a climb speed, why do you have to have a climb skill? You have a walk speed, you don't have a walk skill. They understand the dominant language of the areas they live in, but they cannot speak. They don't possess any biological capacity for producing sound, but they can understand. Okay? But since they can move, that doesn't mean they cannot communicate. If something can move and it is intelligent, it can communicate. There's no reason you couldn't teach these things a tap code, like Morse. There's no reason you couldn't teach these folks Morse code or something similar. You hand them a small rock and they go tick, 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 tick. That's communication. Or they pantomime. You know, I mean, they're an ooze trait. They could create all kinds of different shapes that might help facilitate communication. Environment, any runes or underground, solitary or a pair, treasure incidental. They say pair here because when they have fed enough, they get to a certain point and then they bifurcate, they split off, become 2 slithering trackers, and then they probably stay in vicinity to each other for a while till they move off on their own. So that's the reason. The paralysis ability is pretty powerful. They are transparent, which gives them a really big bonus for being stealthy. And again, I still can't figure out why someone didn't give them a swim speed, because that just seems very, very logical to me. They're transparent. Why wouldn't you hide in water? Now, they're alien. They don't think like we think, but they think. And it talks about the fact that they actually have sometimes created uh, relationships with existing communities. Maybe not necessarily, on an equal footing, because they're going to be treated as lower class. They're moving piles of snot, essentially. But they can also be very useful for keeping places clean. These are perfect for taking care of vermin. If you can say, okay, you can live in this zone, don't attack anything that's got two legs, and we'll protect you from things that might want to harm you. And it's a symbiotic relationship. You take care of the rats, whatever the heck it is that's plaguing this particular zone, and we'll make sure that things don't try to eat you. So these things could be very useful in that regard. Now, they don't have the ability to communicate easily, as I said, but if you're underground, tapping on rock works very well. Sound moves through rock incredibly well. Okay, it's a great medium. So you could very easily be using these things as scouts. Why not? They have blind sense. They could be invisible in water, or just look like a pool on the ground, a wet spot. No one's going to notice them. And if they've been well fed, you're trading with them with food, because they don't really value treasure, but you're making sure they have a steady supply of something to eat. These things can be very useful to a group, or to an underground culture, because they are great spies. Yeah, they may not understand what's being said necessarily, but they can tell somebody about, numbers. X number of individuals move through this area in this direction at this time. I just saw tap, 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 tap. I just perceived 6 individuals moving through this zone heading in this direction. And that piece of information can be the difference between life and death if you're, in the cutthroat world of the Underdark. So how have you used the Slithering Tracker? I've always just used them as monsters, but I haven't given them their full due. They've got an intelligence of 11, folks. Use that. They're smart. They're as smart as your average person. And they have the capacity for language, or at least to understand it. And I have no problem with just giving a tap code language these things, if they've been interacting with sapient species that could then teach them that. I'm not saying they would develop it on their own, but why not? Why wouldn't they develop this on their own to communicate with other members of their own species? Again, intelligence of 11. That means that they could come up with their own language. Why not? I think that would be cool. So let's talk about slithering trackers, how we'd use them, how we would use them, and do you think that the ideas I've thrown out here have any merit? So let's get all oozy